Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're really excited to be hosting the second CRA-W Virtual Undergrad Town Hall event with the financial support of the National Science Foundation. Today, I, Gail Murphy, have the pleasure of hosting Professor Ayanna Howard as our speaker. Ayanna will be discussing her research on healthcare robots for children with special needs before we move to a mentoring session on research undergrad experiences. Before we get right into the event, we just want to make sure that everyone's really clear on the logistics. As many of you are starting to join us, you have the option to join via your computer, your cell phone, or your tablet using the WebEx event app. Which way you choose to join us is up to you, but we hope that you stay with us. If you experience any technical difficulties, please submit your questions to us through the Q&A box. In fact, at any time during the event, you can submit questions that are related either to the speaker's topic or mentoring topics through the Q&A box. Your questions will be answered by either our speaker during our live Q&A session or throughout the session as a private response. As you can see on the screen, the Q&A box should be visible on likely the lower right of your screen. When you submit your questions in this area, the speaker will be able to view them. To keep things a little bit more lively, throughout the presentation, we will have some polls for you to answer. Please don't try to click the PowerPoint. Instead, use the polling section on the right-hand side of your screen to select your answers. Either I or the speaker will let you know when the polls are open, and you will be able to see the overall poll results after they close. So to get you into the spirit of our polls, let's try one. The polls are now open. We want to know if you're interested in pursuing undergraduate research. As you can see, you have three choices: yes, no, or I am unsure. Select one answer, but remember, don't click the PowerPoint slide. Make your selection in the poll area on the bottom right of your screen. If you're having trouble or selecting or using the poll tool, please submit a question to the Q&A section, and one of our staff members will assist you. So go ahead and answer the poll now, please. And now we can see that everyone has answered the poll, and we have our results. 70% of you are interested in pursuing some undergraduate research, and 10% are unsure. This is great because at the end of our speaker, we'll have some time to talk about different kinds of undergrad research that you're going to be able to think about pursuing. So as the host of the town hall, let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm calling in today from the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, where I'm a professor in computer science. My research focuses in software engineering with emphasis on tools to make software developers and other knowledge workers more productive in their daily work. I'm hosting today as a CRA-W board member who's co-organizing the CRA-W Virtual Town Hall Series with Professor Lori Pollack from Delaware University. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Professor Ayanna Howard to you. Ayanna is a professor in bioengineering at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Her research focuses on humanized intelligence, which involves embedding human cognitive capabilities into autonomous systems like robots. Her research is not only technically superb, but has also garnered the interest of the public in media like USA Today. Today you're going to hear about her work on designing robots to help children with special needs. Let's turn it over to Ayanna.
So today I'm going to show you a little bit of my world. And so talking about healthcare robotics and really how it addresses a societal need today. So first I want to kind of lay the foundation of who I am. So I truly believe that anyone and everyone is more than what their career is or what they do. And so I am a robotics engineer. I mean, that's what I know. But I'm also an educator. I consider myself a family person. I'm a risk taker. I did ride a bike. I like to hang glide. I like to have fun. But I also work hard and play hard. And that's kind of the whole person, which really leads to doing good research when you put all of your passion of who you are into it. So in terms of just the stats, I did work at NASA for about 10 years before coming to Georgia Tech, and now I'm at Georgia Tech where I have my own lab, my own students, teach as well as do research. And I also recently founded a startup based on the lab work, and that's focused on healthcare and addressing the needs of children, primarily children with disabilities. And so to tell you a little bit about the research and the reason for it and the need for it. So anytime you talk about research, you have to really inspire and explain why it's important to everyone so that they understand, so that the general public understands. And so one of the things that we've seen in our society is that the rate of children with disabilities and special needs has increased over the years. If you look at everything from children with autism who are on the spectrum, that's increasing children with traumatic brain injury because of car accidents and sport injuries, as well as children with cerebral palsy in all of these domains. And one of the ways that these children improve their quality of life is through therapy. And like most kids like to play. And so having play and therapy put together is really, really important. But the problem is that a lot of parents aren't trained clinicians, aren't trained therapists. And so how do you have therapy in the home environment? So these children, they go into a therapy clinic, they work with a trained therapist, they go home, and they're supposed to continue their therapy, and a lot of them don't. And so finding ways of providing therapy in the home to ensure that the needs of these children are met is very important. And so there we come to robotics. And I think robotics is always the answer. It's like, do you need a cook in your house? Buy a robot. You need a vacuum cleaner? Buy a robot. You need a therapist? Buy a robot. And so why robotics? Robots are, one, they can do things over and over and over again. And so therapy is about repetition. It's about doing something, over and over and over and over again, as many times as you can. And robots are good for this. I mean, they don't get bored. They continue to do stuff at the exact same pace. In fact, the video that's showing on the screen is one of the very first therapy robots that my group worked on. We hacked the Clio. So the Clio is a commercial robot, a play robot. We hacked it with a nunchuck. And what the therapy was is in order to get your robot to dance and move, you had to move your wrist and move your hand and move your arms, which is a form of therapy. And when we use this device with kids, they actually used and did, quote unquote, their therapy. We tested it over a week. And so as our first experiment, we knew, okay, robots have a special place with kids, and this natural affinity for robots and play could be used and incorporated in therapy. And so we continued on that trend. Now, one of the problems with these robotics and children is what is the child demographic? So what is it that we're going to address? And so I say children with special needs, and we have robots that we design for children with autism as well as children with visual impairments. What I'm going to talk about today is children with cerebral palsy. So currently, in terms of the diagnosis, about 1 in 300 children in the U.S., so not talking about internationally, but in the U.S. alone, 1 in 300 children are diagnosed with CP. And typically when you see a child with cerebral palsy, there's a lot of different types of limitations they might have, one of them being movement. So some kids have limited movement, which means that in terms of gait, doing a long-term gait, so going to Disneyland and staying out there for 8 hours a day walking around might be difficult. Going out into the ball field and playing ball might be difficult. And writing an essay that you have to do in class might be difficult. And so therapy basically provides the skill set for these kids to basically function in their job. And the job of every child, just like an undergrad student, is to go to school. That is your job. That is your career. And so therapy for these kids is about enabling these kids to do their job, which is to learn and go to school. But because they're kids, it has to be fun. It has to be engaging. They have to want to do this therapy. They have to want to interact with the robotic system. And so the robot has to be fun and engaging and seem like a playmate, and not necessarily a therapy tool. It has to be fun. And so that's kind of difficult in terms of getting a robot to be fun and engaging and also a therapist. The other challenge is that paying attention and listening is actually an acquired behavior. So, as students in college, you guys have already got it down. You can sit in class at 8 in the morning and listen to your professor. Even if you're trying not to go to sleep, you've learned how to do this behavior. Well, kids have to learn this. And so if you take a 6-year-old and you say, I want you to do something that's pretty boring over and over again, they find it difficult. Their brain just doesn't have the mapping yet. And so we have to figure out, how do we design a robotic system that can be not only engaging, but also recognize when a child is getting bored so that they can switch it up and switch it around. My therapist does this. Preschool teachers, if you ever watch them, they're really good at engaging the kids and changing what they're doing. So how do we take that and figure out what a human does and incorporate it on a robotic system, and doing that modeling and that translation? Another challenge. So in the videos, you see 2 kids. They're both diagnosed with cerebral palsy, but they are on 2 ends of the spectrum. And so when you say a child with cerebral palsy, just like when you say, a child with autism, it's just a label, and the label means nothing. It has nothing to do with what is their ability. And so trying to figure out what is a child's ability is part of the equation, part of the problem. If I have a child who is diagnosed with cerebral palsy, what does that really mean? How do they move? What is their ability? Is it left hand? Is it right hand? Are they in a wheelchair? Are they walking? What is their gait looking like? So all of these questions a label doesn't answer. And so we need to figure out, how do we get our robotic system to also recognize, okay, it's not just about a child with CP, it's really about what is their abilities and how do we make it so that the robot can interact with the child and improve and help them improve in terms of their abilities. So the labeling itself is just the baseline, it's just the start, but the robotic system has to be smart enough and be able to be adaptable in order to recognize what that means. And so if you put this all together, the objective is you have to have a robot that's interactive and child-friendly and engaging. You have to have metrics, so you have to be able to quantify what the child is doing and the child's abilities, and dealing with the different ranges, because every child is different. So I have 2 kids that might come in interacting with the robot. They may both have CP. They may both be 6 years old. They may both be males, and they still will have different abilities. And so how do we create one robotic system that can adapt to both of that? One, we have to think about, how does the robot learn? How does the robot understand engagement and things like that? So the first task that we have, which as, an engineer, computer scientist, I love to say, is understanding what play means. And so we all know what play is. So I can bring you into a Chuck E. Cheese and say, is this play? And most of you guys will say, yeah, that looks like play. And I can take you into a college classroom with a professor lecturing, and I say, is this play? And most of you will say, probably not. So we know how to define play. We know how to label it. So what is it about play? What does play really look like? How do you quantify that? How can I show you 2, say, scenes of a child doing something, and you can label it as, oh, that's play, or that's not play, or that's something else. And so we have to figure out, what does that look like? What does play therapy look like? And when a child is playing, what does that mean? And the way we did that is we actually looked at YouTube videos. And for some reason, parents love to post videos of their kids playing, and they like to label. So you can look on YouTube and put kids play, and you will see tons of videos of kids playing. And you can say kids school, and you'll see tons of videos of kids in school. And so we have a database already available with willing folks putting in information about what play is. And our job is actually to mine it and figure out what are the characteristics in terms of the movements, in terms of the objects, in terms of the sequences of behaviors. And so we did that. We actually went through both YouTube as well as live observations, and then looked at children playing, and then labeled it based on their movements and the objects they use and the language they use to quantify what is playing. So now we can take a scene and show it to a robot, and the robot's like, yeah, that's play, or no, that's not play, or I don't know what that is, but it's definitely, not 100% play and not 100% not play, but it's something in between. And so we can do that. So once we define what play is and what this interaction is, what's next? Then it's figuring out, well, how do we have a play scenario? So we're introducing these robots into these environments, into these homes, and the robot has to interact. The robot has to play. So what kind of play should we do? And so we've looked at basically physical play, which is, playing with blocks, stacking, things like that. We've also looked at gaming play, which is a form of play. And so we have a game, a virtual reality game, where a child, whatever their ability, can interact with basically bubbles, or they can make their little favorite Elmo and pop the Elmo bubbles, or they can wear a tiara. And so they have a virtual environment that they can customize, their parent can customize, and the robot interacts with that. And we also have tablet games because a lot of kids love tablets, love games, love apps. And so it would be really nice if we can have a device that interacts with a child based on their comfort zone and using different types of apps. And so this is our play scenario. So we have the virtual play scenario, the tablet play scenario, and then we have the physical. So to see if you're paying attention out there, we have a poll. What feature of a play scenario do you think is most important? Polls are open. We have 3 choices. And once they're closed, we will see what you guys say. So counting down, we have 7 seconds remaining. If you haven't entered your answer, the poll has ended, and we are seeing. So what features? Number 1, fun for the child, 55%. Number 2, has simple enough commands or rules for the child to follow. And the last 15% is it doesn't matter. And you guys were listening. So I kept saying it has to be fun and engaging to the child, which is true. And one of the things that we found is that if it's fun for the child, the rules can actually be complicated. I mean, have you seen some of these apps out there? Some of them have very, very complicated rules. The kids will still continue to play with them. Minecraft being one of them. And so this is the thing. Fun for the child is the most important part of a play scenario. So we're going to move on. So now that we understand a play scenario, for the therapist wants to be fun and engaging as well, parents as well. But at the end of the day, you need to figure out, does it work? Is it actually doing something? Is it improving the outcome measures of the child? Is it helping in terms of their gait, in terms of their movements, reaching, and things like that? And so we have a whole plethora of algorithms where we're examining the movement profile of the child. And we use 2 different methods. We use onboard cameras for the robotic system, and we also use the Kinect, because the Kinect is very well situated. It can be put into a room, it can image the child, and we can actually get some measures and extract that. And so that's what we give in terms of what the therapist needs of whether they're improving with this robotic platform. Now to show you some of the robots we have. So what you see on your screen is 3 of our robots, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what they're doing. And so if you see at the top left, and we call all of these in the humanoid form. And so the top left, you see a robot, and this is a robot, Darwin, and Darwin is playing ball, and this protocol is based on gait. And so what we found is that if we can get the robot to play soccer with a child and interact, what happens is the child will move around because it's just, look at him. He's so cute. What child wouldn't want to actually play soccer with a robot? And so what we do is one of the protocols we have is interacting with the robot, basically kicking back and forth, moving around and walking. On the other side, where you see a robot with the Georgia Tech logo, the robot is doing a mimicking game. Lifting up his hand, interacting, things like that. So poll 3. poll is now open. Do you think a robot should exhibit or have emotions? Yes? No? I've watched movies about robots and like when they display emotions. Polls are open. Poll has ended. We will see what our answers are. So, well, I can see the polls. I don't know if you can, but most of you said yes. 80% said yes. 5% said no. So robots should have emotions. I think so. So if you think about play and the role of play and interacting, robots need some type of emotions in order to feel like a friend. So I'm going to play this video.
This is how you kill the pig. And it says wood. Turns into wood. It's that.
So this robot definitely has emotions. It's interactive. It understands engagement. It has happy sounds. It shows when it's succeeded. It has emotions when it's sad. And all of this means that a child will continue interacting with the robot. Because it's about play, and play is sharing, and play is succeeding together. And so we've shown that when you have a robot that has emotions, a child will interact with the robot for a much longer period of time. If you have a robot that does the protocol and plays, but is not interactive, the child gets bored. And so emotions is actually part. So here you can see Darwin's looking a little bit sad. It's because he lost at that game. And so that kind of interaction and that kind of emotion allows the interaction and the protocol to be effective. So the whole concept of it being fun, in order to be fun, the robot also has to be engaging. And so that's kind of a summary of robots in healthcare and children with special needs. And Darwin just won. So at the end of it all, if you think about what's going on, at the bottom of the screen, you see Darwin. You can see what's going on the other side. Darwin's actually playing Angry Birds. That's what was going on the screen is Darwin was playing Angry Birds with the child and showing emotions when he lost and he won. So one of the things about healthcare robotics is that we have these robots. They're interacting with children. They're engaging with them. They're basically helping them in the home in terms of the therapy. Question is how much can we do? How much can we actually put on the robotic system in this home environment? And what happens if the child starts to rely on the robot? And so this is a problem. It's one of the things that we have to think about is there's a lot that we can do in terms of healthcare robotics. There's a ton of things. And some of it we may or may not want to do depending on what the role is. So imagine a child who has a robot that's a playmate, that's emotional, that's really, really a good friend. They would love to play with it, so they come home every day. They do their therapy with their robot playmate, and then all of a sudden, robot playmate has to go away. This is an emotional attachment. And so dealing with these kinds of things, we have to also worry about because we want to make it fun, we want to make it engaging, but we have to worry about things like this. And so as we're doing healthcare robotics and as we're working with children, especially children with special needs, we always have to be mindful of how far we should push the technology. Just because we can doesn't necessarily mean we should. And with that, we will move on to
Thank you so much, Ayanna. I mean, it's really inspiring to see what can be done with computer science and with robotics and really change the lives of a lot of kids. So we have some time for questions about Ayanna's research that she was telling us about robots. If you would like to ask a question, please just type it in the question and answer box on the right-hand part of your screen, and we'll make sure that it gets posed to Ayanna. So one question that's come in, Ayanna, is you showed a lot of different devices that you were using with the children, from tablets to virtual reality. Do you find that one works better than another? And how do you choose when to use each one?
So we choose based on the abilities of the child. So, for example, if we have a child who has a severe disability, and severe means high spasticity. They don't have a lot of movement profiles in terms of the ability to do a targeted movement. In that case, we're not going to do a physical environment. They're not able to grasp things. But we can do a virtual environment. So for a child with severe disability, any movement, even a finger, we can take that and they pop the bubbles with their finger. And so really we choose the play scenario based on the abilities of the child. Secretly, most kids love the tablet game.
Cool. That's really interesting. Another question that's come in is, how did you get interested in this kind of research?
So I got interested in robotics and in kind of the goal of robotics in middle school, believe it or not. So middle school, in fact, all of us, middle school is when everybody asks you, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? And you kind of have no idea. You're 12. What do you want to do when you're 50? Who knows? So you have to come up with stuff. And I was always fascinated by sci-fi and powerful figures. And at that time, they had powerful woman figures. So they had Wonder Woman was one of them, and the Bionic Woman was another. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a Bionic Woman, which naturally evolved to being a robotics engineer.
That's really amazing. You knew how early what you wanted to do. Another question we have, would having robots that are shaped in the form of something like a puppy prove to have better interactions with kids from a playing perspective?
So there is research that has looked at animal structure, dogs being one, and cats. So those are the primary. So the Pleo, the dinosaur that I showed earlier on, is another example. And so they've shown that the connection is just the same as with the humanoid, but really the issue is the functionality of the robot. And so the dog shape and the cat shape, they can provide comfort, they can provide some guidance, but you don't expect, say, a dog to tell you how to do something. Whereas a robot, if the robot says, hey, move a little faster, it'll be totally fine if it was a humanoid. But if a dog said that, it's kind of freaky. And so so that's what's the limitation with the animal, the pet kind of thing. But they do work well with things like providing comfort for children with special needs, going to the hospital and things like that. But a different kind of functionality.
Cool. And what age are the children that you do most of your work with robots in your research?
So we've got as young as 4 and as old as 16. So that's kind of the demographic. If you average, the average age has been about 8.
And do you incorporate other kinds of disciplines in your research, like psychology, partnering with maybe researchers from other fields?
Yeah, so my biggest colleagues are actually therapists, physical therapists, and so collaborate with, I have a clinician I work with at Emory Medical University and Georgia State University. They have a physical therapy department. Also, believe it or not, psychology is a discipline that you need, just understanding emotions and connections and bonds. cognitive science to understand how we learn new behaviors, how we engage, the role of engagement and boredom and attention. So we definitely look at multiple disciplines. Some of what they say is softer science, but it's all needed and all necessary.
Well, it sounds like you would never get bored with all the things that you do. Another question that's been asked is, when will therapists be able to use this type of technology?
So some of the technology, my technology, they're using it now, but in basically small, limited sets. But some of the research is coming out. It's, believe it or not, therapy robotics in terms of expanding. A lot of the secret companies are focused on healthcare and robotics, which means that when you have venture capitalists and angels putting in funds, we're going to see it sooner than later.
And what new advances in robotics do you think are most likely to change your research, and how's your research going to change because of it?
So when something like deep learning can be done in real time, that might actually change. And when we could do it with a very small sample set, that would definitely change it. So it's really the intelligence when the whole aspect of learning in a dynamic world and being able to model that so that it can transfer to other scenarios, that would make it a lot easier to do some of the stuff we do.
And what do you think is the most challenging part of your research?
I think the most challenging has been figuring out how to come up with a solution when there hasn't been one before. So a lot of times in research, you can find something that's similar and say, oh, this is similar, and I'm going to take a deviation. But starting in this area where, so there was some area in terms of social robotics, there was healthcare robotics in terms of surgery, but in this domain of therapy as a tool and using robotics to provide that therapy, there was, we kind of had to make it up as we went. And so because of that, because we had to make it up, we made a lot of mistakes at the beginning. I won't tell you how many mistakes, but we made a lot of mistakes. But they're not mistakes if you learn from them. So we learned a lot at the beginning.
Well, we have at least two more questions here. What kind of computer science background do students who work in your lab need to be a good student in your lab?
So all of my students know how to program. Now, that doesn't mean that they had majors in computer science, but they all knew how to program, at least basic C. And then some of them knew C++ and some of them knew Java. And so really, when the students come in, they have to want to be able to program. They have to like that aspect because it's all about algorithms. And unfortunately, MATLAB doesn't run on robots, not in real time. Although we can code and script in something like MATLAB to do proof of concept, when we deploy the robots, we need some basic embedded languages to real time.
And do you worry about children learning behaviors from Playmates whose behavior is more predictable than an actual peer?
So this is one of the issues that we had that had been expressed to us when we started working with children with autism. But we've actually shown that we can translate behavior. And so if we have a child interacting with a robot and they're in a predictive pattern, so they're mimicking the robot exactly, they're doing turn taking, we've actually shown that translates to humans. And so at the end, even though it might be predictive, we can teach different types of behaviors, therapy kinds of things that translates to the human domain. So it doesn't take away, it's shown to enhance the engagement with people when you have the robot in place.
Well, we've got lots of questions coming in. I think we have time to do two last questions. Okay. One says, great research. Have you conducted work to increase physical independence for people with severe physical disabilities? For example, limb repositioning, transferring, and mobility.
So we've done, in terms of the assistive technology domain, we have worked on things like communication devices, who worked on providing access to computers and tablets, so not in the robotics space, but in the assistive technology space, and that's to increase independence. Again, increasing independence, which is, in some cases, it's being able to do your email by yourself.
Cool. And maybe one last research question before we move on to mentoring. What languages do you use to program the robots?
So we use a combination of Java, C, and C#. So Java is primarily for the interfaces to the therapist so they can input the protocol, sometimes to the kids. The low level is C or translated to C. And then C#, we use some Unity, for example, to do some of the Bluetooth protocol and things like that. So those are the three primary languages we use.
Cool. That'll give everybody a start to know what they should start learning in their courses. So we're going to move on to the mentoring part of our town hall today, which is focused on finding and making the most of an undergrad research experience. So I'm going to turn it over to Ayanna again to talk a little bit about her experiences working with undergrads and maybe experiences you had as an undergrad in research.
So a couple of questions that come out of the undergrad research experiences. One, should you do it if you're interested? And if you are interested, how do you find these opportunities? And so one of the things about most faculty at universities is we're at a university because we like students. Else we wouldn't be at a university. And so a lot of faculty are fine with undergrad researchers in their lab. And so how to find a research experience is always just ask. If you're at your school, ask faculty, ask a professor, the person in your class. If you have that class, you're like, oh my gosh, this is really interesting. I really like that. Go talk to that person and say, hey, do you take undergrad researchers? Most faculty, we're there for a reason. And so, one, finding, and we'll talk a little bit about summer types of research, but why should you participate? I'm a total advocate for research experiences. I think if I hadn't done research as an undergrad, so I did research as an undergrad, starting my sophomore year, I'm not sure I would have stayed in engineering or computer science because, frankly, undergrad was very hard. It was nothing like high school. High school, I was a straight A student, valedictorian, and in undergrad, it was like, I was happy for C's in some of my classes, especially like multivariable calculus. And so I really wasn't sure if this was where I wanted to be. But then when I did research as an undergrad, I loved it. It was like, oh, now it all makes sense. Like the equations and the tasks and the homework didn't make sense. But the research, it was the one thing that made sense. And so I think research, getting involved in research, what happens is that all the stuff you learn in your class, half of it makes no sense when you're in class. When you're doing research, you start seeing the connections. You start saying, oh, now I understand, what big O really means and why it's important in robotics. It starts making a lot of sense when you're touching and interacting with these different platforms and in research. And when to apply? You apply after you got through your freshman year because you need at least a semester and a half to figure out college. But as soon as you can, getting involved in a research experience. Like I said, faculty are very open to bringing in undergrads, working with them, assigning them graduate mentors, and ensuring that you get an experience in research in some form or fashion.
Well, let's actually move to a poll. Maybe we can hear from our audience when they might actually be thinking about doing a research experience and give you a little more information about opportunities. So I believe the polls are open now. Maybe you can take a look and see whether you'd rather try an undergraduate research experience in the summer, during a school term, both, or neither. So, Ayanna, maybe you want to speak to the results that came in?
Yeah, so it seems like most of you, 47%, would rather try an undergrad research experience in the summer, and then 35% said both, during the school term and in the summer. Very few of you said neither, which is a great outcome. And then 12% said during the school term. And so pretty much the summer right now wins. And in summer, there's a lot of undergrad research opportunities.
Well, let's try and find out a little bit more from our audience. Where might you want to do undergrad research? You have 4 selections you can give us some information about. Are you looking to do undergrad research at your current school, at a different school, in industry, or maybe any combination? Take a look and give us some feedback about what you're thinking about with respect to your research experiences. Looks like people are thinking about this one more than some of our other polls. Here come up the results.
Yeah, there they are.
There they are. Would you like to speak to those, Ayanna?
Yeah, so it seems most of you are okay with doing undergrad research, basically any opportunity, either at your own school, different school, or in industry. And all of the different places provide different opportunities. So doing a research experience at your own school is wonderful because typically that's going to be during the school year. You can do it for credit, do it as an elective, get to know your faculty at your own school very personally. At a different school, it allows you to see what the world is outside of your own academic environment, provide a resource for grad school, another resource. And then in industry research is different than an academic research environment, but it has its own benefits. And so and industry research such as someplace like AT&T, IBM research, actually provides you a lot more applied research. And so in those kind of environments, you'll get to see research applied to something that might be a product in 3 to 5 years. And so all of those places and different types of experience are great. And so if you have the opportunity to do one or all of them, definitely try to take that.
Fantastic. Well, let's take some more questions from our audience, either about the research presentation, if we haven't answered those, or about possibilities for undergraduate research. It's a great opportunity to learn from somebody who's both had undergrads in their lab and been an undergrad in a lab themselves. So here's a question that's come in, Ayanna. What are 3 things that one might expect to gain from doing an undergraduate research experience?
So a couple of things. One is you can get a little bit of a stipend, so there is some money involved sometimes. The other is that you can get, and one of the things is I'm assuming that all of you at some point are going to go to grad school. Research is the one time that you work with a faculty member that can give you a great letter of recommendation. So it's more than being in a class, because in a class, you're one of 30 students, 40 students. It's just about your grades. But in research, you're interacting with a faculty member, one-on-one, meeting with them at least once a month. And so that kind of relationship is invaluable for letter of recommendation for anything. I can't tell you how many letters I've written, and the ones for my research students are definitely the more personable. And then, again, just seeing the correlation between the classwork and real-world applications. You get that from research as well.
Fantastic. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the programs you've been involved with CRA-W.
So with CRA-W, I have actually been a faculty mentor under Drew. So I've had a student, sometimes 2, for the last, 4, 5 years, and then it was a different program before that. Also with CRA-W, I co-host the grad cohort for grad students. And so that's really, again, that's what I'm saying. Everyone should be going to grad school at some point. And so those are the 2 main programs.
Great. And are they both in the summer or some during the academic year?
Academic year. So I'm also part of CRA-W. I have a student now who's under the career program, and that's during the academic year. Drew is during the summer.
Great. So it sounds like there's lots of different opportunities to do it during term, like participants were interested in, or getting involved in the summer. How do you go about getting an internship or research experience at another university?
So REU, so National Science Foundation has a number of REU programs. And so you can go on the website, and there's a number of universities that have different programs. And you just apply, and you can apply to more than one. So don't just say, oh, I want to go to this one school. You know, apply to multiple ones. The other one is besides the NSF REUs, the DREW program, which is hosted by CRA-W, actually matches you with a external university. And so that's another opportunity to go to a university that's outside of your home university.
Yeah, and that's often really important, isn't it, to get research outlooks from different places and really kind of cross-pollinate ideas from one institution to another. Do you have any input on that?
No, I think that you're right on target. I think one of the things about bringing ideas to another university and then taking those ideas and bringing them back is really showing the importance of just diversity of thought. You get so much better ideas and concepts when you're surrounded by individuals that don't think like yourself. And so when you're going to a different university, you're surrounded by individuals who don't think like you, and they're surrounded by you. And so you really share knowledge in that way. Best way to share knowledge. Wow,
amazing. Amazing advice to give people as well. We'd like to ask you as our participants to do one or two last things with us. One is kind of virtually thank Ayanna for the wonderful research talk, wonderful ideas to think about, and great advice on mentoring. If our participants can do one last poll for us, we'd really like to know if the mentoring session helped answer your questions about undergraduate research. If you still have questions after the session, we're more than willing to get you answers to them as best we can. You can always tweet us at CRA-W Women and use the hashtag Undergrad Town Hall. So please feel free to reach out at any time, and you can continue to put questions into the Q&A box, and we will do our best to answer them for you. So we hope that you will give us a little bit of feedback so that we can make our additional future town halls that are coming up to be even more useful to you. So please take the time to fill out that poll. And I'll just advance to the next slide because we have one more piece of feedback we'd like you to do. We have a feedback survey. You can take the survey by going to the URL that's shown on the PowerPoint slides or using the QR code. You can also click a link that we'll put up in the chat box at some point. We really, really do value your feedback and encourage you to take the survey as we conclude this webinar. So do remember that there's a lot of resources out there. You can visit the CRA-W website for more resources. Whether you're an undergraduate student, a graduate student, a faculty member, it's just a great group of people that can provide you helpful information at all stages of your career. There's mailing lists you can join, follow our Twitter stream, but please, please don't forget to take the feedback survey and give us more information about what you'd like to see. Our next town hall will probably come up probably at the beginning of February, maybe late January. And if you follow the Twitter feed, if you watch the website, you'll see the future offerings that we have. You can always get in touch and give us ideas about topics that you would like to have covered as well. So Ayanna, thank you again. Totally awesome talk. Great advice. And thanks everyone for coming and joining our webinar.